Phylogeny and modern taxonomy. Phylogeny is a science that deals with evolutionary relationships between and among species, entire populations of individuals. In many ways, these relationships or kinships are similar to a large family tree. A family tree shows biological relationships between people. Kinships are represented by connecting lines. These relationships can be presented in a phylogenetic tree, a branching diagram used to show the evolutionary relationships between and among species, similar to a family tree. The bottom of the phylogenetic tree is the ancestor, or the past of the tree. The closer to you the tree, the older the species. In a phylogenetic tree, species are grouped into clades. A clade is a taxonomic group that includes a single common ancestor and all of its descendants. For example, the blue clade is species A and all of its descendants. The green clade is species A and all of its descendants. There can be multiple clades inside of one. For example, if we were to color the entire tree yellow, the blue, green, and red clades are all clades existing in a larger one. Here is an example of a simple phylogenetic tree. If you were to carefully examine the phylogenetic tree, you could see that the species are placed at the tips of the branches across the top of the diagram. The lines, or the branches, represent each species' ancestors going back in time. Notice the arrow to the right of the tree. The top of the tree represents the present day. But as you follow the branches downward, you are going back in time, back to the past. To see how two species are related, follow the branches backwards. For example, if you look here and follow the two red arrows, you see that both the horse and the zebra meet at species A. The same thing goes with the blue lines. The blue lines both meet at species B, the zebra and the rhinoceros. So, you're probably wondering, what exactly does the present to past purple arrow have to do with anything? Well, if you look at the branches of the zebra and the rhinoceros, the most recent ancestor is species B, as mentioned. Species B is located further back in time than species A, since it is located much more further down the tree. This means that the rhinoceros and zebra are more distantly related than the horse and the zebra. In conclusion, species B is the most recent common ancestor of all three species. Today, scientists have named over 2 million species and still have an additional 5 to 100 million species to name and discover. So to make things easier, when naming species, scientists use a classification system that groups them according to a set of criteria. This is known as taxonomy. Taxonomy is the classification, identification, and the naming of organisms. Both a major strength and weakness in the traditional classification system is that the groups of species are observed primarily by morphological characteristics. Phylogenetic analysis can also reveal evolutionary relatedness of organisms. which are grouped into different clades that are non-limited to a set number of taxonomic ranks. A challenge found when using this system is revealing evolutionary relatedness that can go back millions of years ago. This task requires detailed analysis of both fossil and genetic evidence. In traditional classification system, crocodiles are grouped with turtles, snakes, and lizards because of their shared physical features. In modern taxonomy, crocodilians are grouped with birds because they share a more recent common ancestor. Both birds and crocodilians are included in the larger reptile clade. DNA barcoding was first proposed by Paul Herbert, a researcher at the University of Guelph. The idea is to use DNA technology to create a DNA profile of every species in the form of a barcode. Researchers will now be able to use a handheld device to identify any species from a tiny sample of DNA. This is similar to when you are getting checked out at a grocery store. The cashier that is serving you scans the barcode of your item in order to see the price. Pretty cool, right? This is an example of a barcode for the frog-eating bat known as the Trachops curiosus. The International Barcode of Life project, known as the IBOL, was launched in 2010. It is supported by 25 countries and involves hundreds of leading research scientists. Dr. Herbert's lab has already used DNA barcoding technology to reveal widespread false labeling of fish products sold in Canada and the USA. Investigative journalists bought 153 samples of fish from grocery stores across Canada. DNA testing revealed that 34 of these 153 samples were mislabeled. For example, fish labeled as wild-caught coho salmon was actually farm-raised Atlantic salmon, and fish labeled as cod was actually haddock. Kingdoms and domains. The Linnean classification system recognized only two kingdoms of living things, animals and plants. When biologists began to use microscopes, they discovered many new microorganisms, such as prokaryotes. A prokaryote is a single-celled organism that does not contain membrane-bound organelles. Biologists also discovered many new eukaryotes. An eukaryote is any organism whose cells contain organelles. Some eukaryotic organisms are single-celled, while others are multicellular. These organisms were called protists. Their cells showed an extraordinary diversity of shapes, sizes, and life cycles. Biologists also began to see evidence of significant differences between plants and fungi. Today, most biologists classify more than 1.7 million known living species into 6 kingdoms. This picture shows a typical representations of the 6 kingdoms of life. The most easily recognizable kingdoms are the animals, plants, and fungi. The eubacteria, which are commonly called bacteria, and the archaea are the prokaryotic and are often extremely difficult to distinguish due to their extremely small size and lack of internal structure.
No fool, oh, they want to go back. No fool, oh, they've got a mind track. No fool, oh, it's all a mystery. Let it come and let it be.
Eubacteria with 10,000 described species. Archaea with 400 described species. Protista with 100,000 described species. Fungi with 100,000 described species. Plants with 250,000 described species. Animals with 1.2 million described species. This simplified phylogenetic tree shows key evolutionary relationships among the 6 kingdoms. Note that the protist kingdom does not represent a single clade. The brown, red, and green algae are more closely related to plants, while the amoeboid protists are more closely related to fungi and animals. Domain is the highest taxonomic level. There are 3 domains of life: Eubacteria, Archaea, and Eukaryotes. In 1996, Carl Hughes conducted a detailed analysis of living organisms. He revealed that all organisms could be classified into 3 distinct groups.